Seducing Lord Williams that day, I was both naive and indulgent. I cried in pain in bed. Edward teased, "Lady, I almost thought I was about to fall for you." From then on, I became the canary in his cage. From a young model to a movie star. When news of Edward's engagement was widely reported, everyone mocked my shattered dreams of marrying into a wealthy family. Later, I ran away without telling anyone. I heard that Lord Williams was almost going crazy trying to find me. When I was 19, I followed Edward. The day we met was a gamble for me. My agent secretly drugged my drink with an aphrodisiac, intending to send me to the bed of a wealthy businessman. I had to save myself. Lucky for me. When I struggled to restrain my gasps and fell onto Edward, I felt for the first time that heaven favored me. Edward liked clean girls. I heard his first love met all the conditions of a perfect woman, from a good family background to gentle character. But I was different. I was cunning and alluring. "Sir, please save me." I reached my fingers into his large hand, gently scratching his palm. To seduce a man, one must first become a cat. I dedicated my lifetime of acting skills to this moment. Tears filled my eyes as I pitifully gazed up at Edward. Despite his handsome appearance, he lacked compassion. People in the business world called him a smiling tiger. Polite and courteous, but not to be underestimated. His mood was good that day, with one arm around my waist. His long fingers pinched my chin. He teased, "Lady, do you need me to take you to the hospital?" The word lady he used was full of symbolic meaning. But I didn't mind. I kissed him lightly on the neck where his Adam's apple was, biting my lip. With flushed cheeks, I said, "Sir, you know I want something else." I knew he liked obedient girls, but I also knew he couldn't resist the provocative ones. It was a memorable night. In the bathroom, on the bed, and on the floor with the carpet. All carried a bit of the scent of Edward and me. When I curled up in pain, Edward raised an eyebrow jokingly. "Lady, I almost thought I was about to fall for you." His voice had a magnetic quality. Even when saying something hurtful, it was still very appealing. Ignoring his insult, I adjusted my breathing to make my voice less broken. What if my agent really came later? My fingers wandered on his chest, playfully saying, "Blackmail you for $1 billion, or else expose our affair?" Edward laughed freely. "He's in Los Angeles, and there will be no trace of him from then on." A chill ran down my spine. If I offended him today, then in Los Angeles, the one who would disappear would be me. Edward was a gentleman. So, apart from the initial shock, everything went smoothly afterwards. He whispered in my ear more than once, "Baby, you're amazing." If I pleased him, he would also kiss my neck, saying ambiguous words. Even when I begged for mercy, he would praise me on one hand and not let me go on the other. There was a moment when I almost thought I wasn't a woman deliberately trying to have a relationship with him. Instead, I was his lover. But it was only a moment of illusion. I soon realized the truth. I couldn't help but mock myself. Edward and I were always worlds apart. When I woke up, there was a bank card by the bed. I understood that Edward saw me as nothing more than a plaything for his amusement, and playthings naturally came with a price tag. I was awakened halfway through. It seemed Edward's private steward had come personally to take away the trash bin. After all, it contained what Edward had thrown away yesterday. If someone unscrupulous used me and bore his child, that would be troublesome for him. Of course, I was well aware that I was also among the unscrupulous. The steward brought clothes and a business card. Edward said, "If you need anything, you can call this number. The bank card is for you to handle on your own." I accepted it without hesitation. Naturally, there was no need to refuse. There was no point in being both there and absent in the deliberate seduction. After that day, I never contacted Edward again. It was impossible to expect him to visit someone like me, a model he probably didn't remember even the name of. But I didn't expect to encounter him while waiting for the bus. Rain was already falling from the sky, the dark night heavy and oppressive. The car window rolled down. Edward's handsome features drew many glances. I politely but distantly said, "Edward, get in the car." I obediently got into the car. Edward familiarly placed me on his lap. The partition in the car slowly rose, cutting off any ambiguous sounds. He leaned in to kiss me, seeming confident that I wouldn't refuse. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. His voice was low and hoarse as he said, "Why didn't you come find me?" My hands wrapped around his neck, complaining, "The company always arranges dinner parties for me, and I never have time to think about you." He pinched my waist. Lies. Yes, it's true. I was looking for an opportunity to meet him again. I didn't just want to gain something from Edward. I wanted endless resources, enough to boost my career. I said sullenly, "I was worried you'd find me annoying, like a clingy band-aid that won't come off." I was way out of line that day. Now, I feel like a child who's done something wrong. Edward seemed to want to say something, but suddenly, trouble struck. The car was hit by a huge force, and before I fainted, I only heard a loud bang that nearly burst my eardrums. I was tied up. To be precise, Edward was the one who implicated me. The kidnappers wanted money from the Williams, and incidentally, they tied me up. I couldn't help but curse inwardly. I never thought there would be a threat to my life now. If I had known, I wouldn't have crossed him. But this time, it was both dangerous and an opportunity. This was evident when Edward was rescued, and I became a hostage to the kidnappers. "Edward, if you want to save your woman, show some sincerity." The kidnapper's arm circled around my neck. Edward's expression was cold. The place was surrounded by police, and now Edward only needed to wait for the kidnapper to be caught. Of course, my life or death didn't matter. When the kidnapper pointed the gun at Edward, I frowned in worry. Then, I looked at him firmly. I pulled out the discarded blade hidden at my waist and slashed the kidnapper's eye. I didn't have total certainty. But I was a desperate gambler. There was a 50% chance of dying. Similarly, there was a 50% chance of being rescued and making Edward see me with new eyes. I won the gamble. The kidnapper's eyeball was deeply cut by me. Distracted, the kidnapper dropped his gun. Edward pulled me into his arms. There was still blood on my hands from the attacker. I trembled as I collided into Edward's chest. He asked me, "Are you scared? To seduce a man, one must become a cat, or even a tiger." I said, "Yes, but he might hurt you." Edward laughed and pulled me closer, kissing my lips. I knew. Regardless of whether it was true or not, this phrase pleased him. I wasn't actually scared. Growing up in the slums, I had fought with other street children over a scrap of food. Injuring a kidnapper was nothing. It was nothing. When I transitioned to becoming an actress, Edward didn't plan to interfere much. Once when he visited the set, I deliberately provoked Jessie, the actress who had always made things difficult for me. In the scene, she was supposed to pour a glass of water on me and slap me. Using the work as an excuse, she had been doing many retakes. I was calculating the time. Jessie was reciting her lines, "I'll kill you today. 3, 2, 1. Her hand was stopped halfway in the air. Edward's assistant remained calm, but Jessie's face twisted in pain. I was wet. And my face was slightly swollen. I looked like I had just been drenched in the rain, resembling a broken puppy. Edward sat nearby, and the director was very polite. He glanced at my position and said in a cold tone, "My baby is so professional." It was the first time he openly acknowledged me in front of others. Past memories flashed through my mind like a series of images. I was so lost in thought that I had a moment of mishearing the reporter's questions. I politely smiled. "Could you please repeat that question?" In 7 years, I had grown from a pitiful young model to a popular movie star. "How do you feel about the news of Edward and Selena's engagement? How is your relationship with Edward developing? Were you disappointed by the news of his engagement? Has Edward made your thoughts public? When your wealthy family dream shattered, how did you feel?" The reporters fired questions like they were on automatic. They probably just wanted me to complete their assignment. I laughed, without a hint of jealousy or anger. Instead, I graciously offered my blessing. "Edward and Selena are meant to be together, and they will surely live happily ever after." Edward and I were mutually beneficial. I had no hopes to be disappointed about. The video of my interview quickly made it to the top 3 trending on media platforms. Comments from netizens ranged from mockery to support, but some bored individuals had already started spinning conspiracy theories. The article's popularity was soaring. To Helen, "Do we need to take down the hot search?" my assistant asked nervously. I looked at her in confusion and asked, "Do we need money that badly?" Free recommendations, don't just take anything. I logged onto Instagram to promote my new movie. My new movie welcomes everyone to watch. Along with it, I posted a side profile photo of today's preparation on the red carpet. 10 minutes later, Edward sent me a message. Tonight come to your place. I've been based here since I came to Hollywood, while Edward has been busy traveling all over the world. The last time he took 2 days off for me without my consent. Those 2 days. He hardly let me get out of bed. My fingers tapped lightly on the table, then told the assistant. Go buy something. Get the large sized, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. He only comes to me to fulfill his physical needs. The things we usually have at home are all used up. I don't want to get pregnant. Edward's mood was not good. From the way he showed no mercy, I could tell. I groaned in discomfort. Edward leaned in to kiss my ear. Baby, say my name again. Harsh and tempting. I always comply with his requests in bed. Edward. Lighter. He demanded. Edward. He chuckled, teasingly and playfully, not wild enough. I know he might not feel good inside, so I have devised many ways to torment me. I also know I can't outplay him. In this twisted relationship, I will always be at a disadvantage. I held back the resentment in my heart. He pinched my waist, with some force. My cheeks flushed, calling his name as he requested. Edward did not let me off. He continued as usual. It hurts. It hurts, just endure it. I lowered my head, allowing a tear the size of a bean to fall onto the bedsheet. I can endure a lot. I endured humiliation, indulgence. Until it ends, I never figured out Edward's unpredictable reasons. Without looking back, he walked straight into the bathroom. I pulled the blanket over, barely covering our intimate bodies. This suite is located on the top floor in the city center, a prime location. You can see the billboards on the building just by lowering your head. On the billboard is the jewelry shoot that belongs to me. I looked so beautiful and elegant on it. No one could imagine that I used to be an orphan wandering in Los Angeles. When I was 19, in order to have my own house in Los Angeles, I signed with the company and debuted as a young model. The company arranged me to wear revealing outfits, turning around in one annoying party after another, just to have a place in the inner pages of a magazine. Veterans taught us how to cleverly avoid the clutches of investors. They taught us how to showcase our charming figure during magazine cover shoots. They taught us how to avoid malicious methods that cause allergic rashes that won't show up on camera. They never taught us how to survive in the entertainment industry with dignity. Dignity is something only the top of the pyramid has, but now, veterans sneer, the smoke at their fingertips circles, reddening their eyes. All for dignity. Would you give up everything? At that moment, I looked at the huge billboard on the building, displaying the lovely smile of the popular actress Haley and the brand she endorses. Passers-by have to look up to see it. Fireworks go off, dazzling. Desire, like the devil's claws, gnawing at my heart. I want fame. I want a brilliant career. I want to be famous and successful. Now the billboard has my face on it. Pedestrians have to look up to see me. I have a lot of money, but people are always greedy. When I had no money, I wanted money. When I had money, I wanted dignity. I lit a thin cigarette. I didn't have the habit of smoking before, but recently I found that nicotine indeed can temporarily numb the nerves. Emotions dissipate with the exhaling smoke. After all, now I want dignity. This is a big taboo between Edward and me. When Edward came out of the bath, I was lost in thought on the balcony. He held my waist. What are you thinking? I honestly replied, smiling brightly as if I had never been disturbed by this emotion. I'm thinking, when are you getting married? I will definitely give you a big gift. Edward sneered, slightly exerting force on his hand, turning me around. Helen, are you looking forward to it? Even though Edward is already 30 years old, he's still very handsome. At this moment, he was wearing a bathrobe, his skin was very fair, his hair still damp, and water trails snaking down his neck. I smiled and placed my arm on his shoulder, playing with him nonchalantly. I shifted all the responsibility to him. You said, when you get married or tired of me, we will break up. The second year as Edward's lover. At that time, our intimacy in bed was deepening. As a financial supporter, he diligently helped me secure several supporting roles and endorsements. My income has increased significantly. Although I am not virtuous, I still know how to be grateful. That winter, his birthday. Originally, we were supposed to celebrate together in the evening. But at that time, he was probably so busy that he forgot his birthday, forgot that he was going to have dinner with his family. He also forgot, or perhaps didn't care, to inform me that he would not be returning. I was used to waiting for this role. That night, it was almost midnight, and his birthday was almost over. For the first time ever, I called him. "Edward, when are you coming back?" There was a pause on the other end. Edward's voice was hoarse and low, probably from drinking. "You were waiting for me?" I didn't directly answer his question. "I thought we had plans tonight." He laughed, carefree and amused, more unreserved than his usual gentlemanly restraint. Waiting. I calculated the time, made a bowl of noodles. I wasn't good at cooking before, as long as you can eat. To cook this bowl of noodles, I even went to learn from a chef in a 5-star restaurant. When he came in, the noodles had just been cooked. I presented it to him sincerely, feeling a little nervous. I admit, at that time, I put some thought into him. Edward has been mingling in the business world for a long time. He can easily see through the thoughts of a 20-year-old girl. Taking off his coat, he hugged my waist. Although he was doing affectionate actions, he spoke extremely coldly. "You don't need to put so much effort into me. When I'm tired of you, or want to get married, we'll naturally break up." You could say Edward is a gentleman. He told me the result in advance, so I wouldn't have other thoughts. I cordially brushed it off. "I just cooked an extra bowl. How could that be?" Edward was pleased by my naive words and didn't expose them. Just tearing open my skirt. "Do you know what birthday gift I desire more?" Of course, I knew. That day, he indulged with me for a long time. After drinking, he was a bit more of a jerk than usual, forcing me to say shameful things. After some time passed, when he fell asleep, I quietly got out of bed. The noodles had clumped up. I tasted a bit. It tasted bad. But now he's about to get married, and he hasn't gotten tired of me yet. It's been 7 years, people's cells have been renewed. I can't possibly continue being a third party. "I saw the news about you and Selena. You look compatible. It wouldn't be appropriate if I stepped in between, right?" Edward comes from a strict family. Pre-marriage affairs can be overlooked by many women. But after marriage, at least loyalty to the wife should be maintained. Perhaps my smile was too dazzling. Edward sneered. "A match made in heaven? Happily ever after?" I knew he must have seen my statement on the red carpet. I sighed. "Edward, I sincerely wish you well. Even if you want me to buy a lock engraved with Edward and Selena's names and put it on the Lovelock Bridge, I'd be very willing." Edward gripped the railing, his eyes playful and teasing, but his tone was full of resistance. "Darling, when will our relationship be? Up to you to decide." Edward was angry. He rarely showed his dominance in front of me. At this moment, although he was smiling, he was full of aggressiveness. His fingertips roamed my neck, inching over my skin, then lightly slipped into the groove. "I hadn't had enough sleep yet. Who gave you the courage to talk about leaving?" He sneered, then withdrew. At that moment, I felt an impulse. "Edward." He paused. "I meant, let's end it here. It's better for both of us. Darling, this time I'll pretend I didn't hear that. But there won't be a next time." I entered a cold war with Edward. Or rather, I unilaterally broke up with him. The news headline reads, "Mr. William is seriously ill and has been sent to the hospital." The Williams family is wealthy and influential. Now that Edward's father is seriously ill, it inevitably involves the transfer of power. Edward will be busy, which also gave me a lot of free time. I slowly started to let go of my work. Time passes like flowing water. A month went by quickly. Kathy messaged me. She is the second female lead in my new movie, and we have a lot of scenes together, so we naturally became somewhat familiar. "Darling, do you want to go to the nightclub?" she messaged, followed by an address. Most of the recent work is in the final stages, although the movie invitations are continuous, but I haven't found a good script yet. It's time to relax. I knew this nightclub, many artists go there, and they keep the secrecy very well. All right. I wore a camisole dress, with a black leather jacket on top, looking sexy and charming. After a month of no contact, I had already accepted that Edward and I had broken up. Consider it a breakup. After all, these 7 years he hadn't had any other woman. Until I walked into the compartment, I realized something was off. Seeing Selena sitting there, everyone looked like they were watching a good show, their eyes shuttling between me and her. Kathy looked somewhat disgruntled. She apologized to me with her lips, and I didn't blame her. Perhaps she was also being pressured that there were many familiar faces around. Bertie was the first to speak, jokingly saying, "Hey, big movie star, come join us." Everyone was cheering. I didn't want to dampen the mood. Someone offered me a seat. I sat next to Selena. Bertie poured me a drink. "Today, Selena is treating, so don't be shy, have whatever drink you want." I winked playfully. Since Selena is so generous, then I'll have the most expensive one. Bertie laughed heartily, and Selena, sitting nearby, also chuckled. She truly was a refined lady, very elegant. "Edward told me about you," her voice was soft. I felt a tremor in my hand holding the glass. Despite how involved I was with Edward, even if our relationship made headlines, or if everyone treated me with deference because of him, I couldn't help but feel uneasy in Selena's presence. I smiled warmly. "Oh? What did he say about me?" "He said you are beautiful, polite, and very interesting." It doesn't sound like much of a compliment. I glanced at this woman who seemed to harbor some ill will towards me, but was trying her best to restrain it. Selena, Edward's first love, indeed gentle and sophisticated. What did Selena want to say? I asked directly. Selena stopped smiling and calmly said, "Edward said you are very interesting, so may I ask you to leave Edward?" She paused, as his fiancée. The room fell silent. Everyone seemed to be waiting for my answer. I held the glass and swirled the liquid inside, not in a rush to respond. "Helen, don't be shameless. Selena has been abroad for so long, and when she came back, she got engaged to Edward. You should leave early. Who doesn't know that you people are just playthings? Are you dreaming of marrying into a wealthy family?" Selena and Bertie sat on their high horse, watching everyone criticize me. It seemed like everyone was convinced that I wouldn't leave Edward. Maybe it was for money, or maybe it was for power. I chuckled absurdly. I touched glasses with Selena's glass on the table. "Didn't Edward tell you?" Selena looked puzzled. "Tell me what?" I said unhurriedly, "If I were you, I would go and secure Edward, instead of coming to make things difficult for me." As soon as I mentioned that, the door to the room opened. It was someone I hadn't seen in a month. Edward rarely looked so serious. "What are you all doing?" Everyone fell silent. I swallowed a sip of the wine, bitter. I didn't look at him. "Selena, I broke up with Edward a month ago." My eyes widened in shock. Selena's face looked unpleasant, tears welling up in her eyes. "Edward." Edward voiced firmly. Perhaps I didn't express myself clearly. "The engagement doesn't count." I looked at him in shock. "Helen is my girlfriend." He smirked. "Who gave you the guts to humiliate her?" Edward's car sped away. I was silent all the way. I received an apology message from Kathy on my phone. I didn't react much, and deleted the message directly. Whether today was a forced act or voluntary, I wouldn't accept her apology. Edward owned many properties in Los Angeles. It was the downtown apartment that he liked the most. He took me inside and moved in for a kiss. I just felt tired. I don't want to. I don't want to kiss. I don't want to hug. I don't want to make love. Edward pursed his lips and explained, "There's no engagement between Selena and me, it was just an oral agreement from our parents in childhood." I was unaware of the engagement news released by her and my mother the last time. The news was meant to see your reaction and will be retracted tomorrow. He rarely had such patience. "Edward," I spoke softly, holding back a choking feeling in my throat. "Can you let me go?" Today's question was just the appetizer. There would be no outcome between Edward and me. If this continued, even my last bit of dignity would disappear. Edward held my chin, forcing me to look up. "Let you go?" he said in an almost absurd tone. "Yes, let me go." I took a deep breath. "Whoever you marry, I don't care. It's you who said that as long as you get married, or bored, we would break up." Edward's eyes held a storm. "So when you saw my engagement news, those moments of joy weren't fake?" "That's a statement. Yes, if not this time, it will be the next." I frowned, struggling to hold back tears. "After 7 years, when will you get bored?" Edward's aura lowered, appearing to suppress his anger, but his tone remained gentle, as usual. Darling, why do you think I would get bored? Instead of being with you for 7 years, because I love you, I raised my eyes and looked into his. Firmly, I said, because I don't believe it. Edward chuckled. Release? He said with mocking disbelief. Sure, go ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Can we part ways now? After all, you only see me as a plaything. Losing one canary, you can always find another canary. Edward never returned to his former gentle and gentlemanly self. Plaything? He raised an eyebrow. Do you know what a plaything is? His tone changed, as if hearing something ridiculous. Many in the circle love to toy with women. Do you want me to treat you the same way? His eyes were full of cynicism, shedding his usual facade. Then go ahead, he said coldly. What? Edward strode over and pinned my hand behind my back. The red dress had long been violently torn by him. There was no desire in Edward's eyes, only a chilling calm after the storm. My clothes were in shambles, his suit was immaculate. His long fingers wandered around the waist, moving downward. Soon, he whispered harshly in my ear. Darling, this is what playing really means. My breath was uneven. Tears had long covered my cheeks. He wiped away my tears. Don't leave. You provoked me, so let's continue to provoke each other. I ignored Edward from then on. At 19, I had wanted to buy a small room in Los Angeles to have a sense of belonging amidst my nomadic life. But now, I had it. Yet, I found that what I truly wanted was never attained. What I gained from Edward eventually backfired. Recently, the production crew asked me to reshoot a stunt where I had to fall into the water. Although I was on my period and in pain, I didn't want to delay the production, wanting to finish the unfinished work quickly. The river water in early autumn was still chilly. The abdominal cramps occasionally made me feel dizzy. By the time I finished the shoot, it was already late. The sun had just set. As I made my way back to the trailer with the towel the assistant had given me, the pain in my abdomen grew stronger. Just as I was about to reach the car, my body suddenly went weak, and I collapsed. It wasn't painful because Edward caught me. His frowning expression showed deep concern. I thought falling in love with Edward was ultimately my own fault. When I woke up, the dull pain in my abdomen had subsided. The hospital room was dark. Illuminated only by the moonlight streaming through the window onto the white curtains, I could barely make out Edward's figure sitting by the bedside. He wasn't in the shadows, outlining his handsome features. I gazed at him for a while. Edward it seemed as if he had just regained his senses, his aura no longer imposing, instead appearing somewhat dejected. What's wrong with you? He held my hand, gently rubbing his thumb over the back. His eyes were red, and he spoke softly. Helen, the doctor said you had a previous miscarriage. But why? He sniffled, continuing with difficulty. I didn't know about this child. Edward's words were like a bolt of lightning in the clear sky, tearing through long-buried memories. I pushed his hand away. Slowly sitting up, I said, You didn't know? I thought your mother would have told you. Edward and I had a child together. I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. It happened in our 4th year together. I accidentally got pregnant. I was panicking and didn't know what to do. Instinctively, I wanted to call Edward. But he didn't pick up. Instead, it was Edward's mother who came to find me. Actually, it wasn't the first time I had met her. We had seen each other at a few parties before. She smiled kindly, but her intention was to get me to sign a consent form for surgery. You are still young and don't understand the responsibility of a family. Our family will never allow an illegitimate child to roam outside, let alone allow Edward's child's mother to be a woman trying to seduce him. Mrs. Williams' words were harsh but true. Does Edward know? I asked bitterly. Mrs. Williams smiled elegantly. Whether he knows or not is not important. What's important is to start. Forgive my bluntness, but you and Edward were wrong from the start. So this uncontrolled outcome should be corrected. Do you really think Edward would consider you important enough to abandon a project of immense value to be with you? She was right. I didn't think so. That day there was a thunderstorm. I signed the papers numbly. Not a single tear fell. I thought, maybe this is the beginning of getting back on track. If I wanted to be a bad woman from the beginning, then I had to follow through. For the sake of Edward's power. Don't think about anything else. I'm sorry. At that moment, the sense of grievance seemed to engulf me. Why? Why didn't you answer the phone back then? Tears rolled down my face in big drops. Edward tried to embrace me, and I struggled hard. Why are you coming to ask me now? I was just starting to forget about this. I clenched my fists and hit him over and over, my cries getting more and more sorrowful. Why didn't you take precautions? Why are you so irresponsible? Why are you doing this to me? A warm drop landed on my neck. Edward was crying. That moment, I was in Europe and couldn't get away. When you called, my phone was in the bedroom, and at that time, I was in a meeting. When I called you back, you said it was nothing, so I didn't pay much attention. His voice choked up. It's my fault, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the child, I didn't know you were suffering, I'm sorry. I furrowed my brow. Tears blocking my view, unable to see ahead. So Edward could cry over this child. I thought he wouldn't care. But I didn't shed a tear during the surgery. It was raining heavily in Los Angeles at the time. I went home alone. I cooked myself a bowl of noodles. The rain seemed to fall slowly then, only reaching me now. I asked Edward, if you feel guilty, can you let me go? Edward still said no. He was cruel and resolute. Either fall in love with me again, or I'll make you love me, darling, those are your only two options. I'm wickedly selfish. So my love is coercioned. I never expected to see Mrs. William again. While Edward was indirectly imprisoning me, she gave me a chance. A chance to get away from Edward. She sent me abroad, telling me not to come back for a while. All of this was probably to prepare for Edward's marriage. How much can one love a person? In the end, you have to submit to reality. Helen, before I married my husband, I got rid of many female celebrities for him. I didn't show much expression. And then what? I thought you were like them. But my son called me a couple of days ago, threw a big tantrum and even did some outrageous things. Mrs. Williams' eyelashes drooped as she continued, I think he truly loves you, but he's spoiled and authoritarian. That's not how love should be. So I want to give you the future you want. As a way to make amends, even though it's only 1 in a million, she drove me to the airport. When we got out of the car, she stopped me. I'm sorry, it rained in Chiang Mai today. I don't know if it's because of the non-stop hustle and bustle of these 3 months, or if my health has deteriorated. Today, I caught a cold from just getting caught in the rain. For 3 months, I first went to Europe, playing around in cities like Sweden and the UK. Edward didn't know, my childhood dream was to travel around the world. When I worked at the port, I envied those wealthy people on luxury cruises. In this materialistic world, I have never been exempt. So this time, I didn't go abroad under the guise of variety shows or filming. I genuinely enjoyed a trip that belonged to me. My fame overseas is not too high, so even without wearing a mask or sunglasses, few people recognize me. This gave me the freedom I wanted. Tonight, there's a charity gala. Many celebrities and business elites will be there. Of course, Edward will be there too. At the gala, many people came up to talk to me. Among them was the lead actor of a new movie, Albert, who had just won an Oscar 2 years ago. The movie was a huge success and had already been released on major platforms. It had high box office earnings. I heard you disappeared for 3 months. He raised his champagne glass to toast with me. I jokingly replied, it doesn't count, just went out on a solo trip to clear my mind. I was quite familiar with him. In the movie, we were worthy opponents. The same in real life. He's a very good actor. Have you read the script for another movie recently? He asked me. It's been given to me, but I haven't had the chance to read it yet. Albert smiled sincerely. Helen, I sincerely hope you'll be part of this film. It's a great fit for you. I think the director is aiming for awards. All right, for sure, I said. He looked at me with a hint of unknown affection in his eyes. On the other side, there was a commotion. Edward showed up. I subconsciously looked in his direction and unexpectedly locked eyes with him. Albert asked me, Helen, are you single now? I thought for a moment, yes. I am single now. Can we have dinner together tomorrow? My smile froze. Edward walked towards me. I chuckled and said to Albert, sure, there's nothing wrong with friends having a meal together. Edward chuckled. Can I ask you a question too? Sure. Can I pursue you? I had no reason to say no. Edward proved his pursuit with actions. Different flowers every day, daily dates. But we never held hands for 2 months. Yet, his actions were more heartwarming than any previous intimacy. I accepted an invitation for a new movie role. Albert was the male lead. There was a bed scene with Edward watching the whole time. The director's smile seemed a bit forced. Perhaps his pressure was too strong, so I had to redo the scene multiple times. Albert, feeling helpless, covered my body with a blanket. "Are you okay? We can shoot this tomorrow." "No problem." I gave Edward a glare. He snorted lightly and walked away. I chuckled. "Director, we can start now. We are professional actors, this time we nailed it in one go. By the time the filming ended, it was already late. I didn't have any scenes the next day. Edward personally drove me back to the villa. When I reached home, I tried to get out of the car, but the door wouldn't open. "Edward, I can't open the car door." Sitting desolately, he said somewhat helplessly, "Baby, I'm so jealous." The car door finally opened. Suppressing a laugh, I excitedly got out of the car. After walking for a while, I turned back. Edward was leaning against the car, his slender fingers holding a cigarette. His thin lips exhaling white smoke. The wind made his black hair sway. At that moment, a bell seemed to ring in my heart. I bit my lip, turned back, and trotted to hug Edward. I blinked at him coquettishly. A reward. After finishing the scenes in the country, the crew had to go to England for shooting. The continuous rain in Newcastle gave me a headache. The sky was always overcast, making even the buildings less appealing. Edward has been shuttling between the country and England lately. Now, his business in Los Angeles had some issues, so he had to go back to handle it. There was no news for several days. The crew was staying in a unified hotel. On the day of wrapping up, it started drizzling outside. The continuous rainy days made me feverish. Taking fever medicine, in a semi-conscious state, I seemed to dream of Edward. Edward was wearing a black coat, tall and handsome, not inferior to the male stars in the country. Perhaps due to the fever, I felt alternately cold and hot. Consequently, I felt vulnerable as well. So when Edward squatted down next to the bed and locked eyes with me, I instinctively held his hand. His slender fingers were somewhat cold, while my body was burning up. I subconsciously wanted to get close to him for comfort. Edward, my voice sounded soft and a bit delicate. He replied with a grunt, "I'm here. I feel terrible." His hand touched my forehead. "You're getting cooler, don't worry. 3 years in England, everything was done alone." Now, Edward appeared in my dream, touching the softest part within me. I brushed his palm against my face. Edward chuckled lightly. As he leaned in, our nose tips touched. His voice was charming and sexy. "Baby, I miss you so much." But upon waking up, there was no sign of him. It was probably just a dream. I was covered in sweat. I took a shower in the bathroom. Then, I heard a knock on the door. Subconsciously thinking it was Edward, I rushed out to open the door. But it was Albert. My eyes dimmed instantly. Albert smiled teasingly at me. "Helen, are you disappointed?" I waved my hand. "No, what's up? The director asked me out for dinner to see if you're feeling better." "I'm much better now, you can come in to wait." After changing clothes, I went to the dinner place with Albert. He looked at me. People said he had a pair of affectionate eyes. Perhaps they were right. He raised his glass to me. "Helen, I'm really happy to work with you." I politely replied, "I am too." In a serious tone that seemed like a heartfelt confession, he said, "Not only am I happy, Helen, maybe it's presumptuous, but I really like you. If possible, I hope you can accept my pursuit." My lips moved. Yet, I declined. "Albert, as a colleague, I am very happy to have you as a partner. But when it comes to romantic feelings, I don't think that's possible." For some reason, Edward's image flashed in my mind. It seemed like I already had someone I loved. At that moment, I suddenly realized how much I missed Edward. I wanted to pack up immediately and go back to Los Angeles to find him. As I stepped out, I spotted him standing at the crossroads. He was wearing a black coat, blending into the dusk. Resembling a character in an English magazine. When he looked at me and raised an eyebrow, it seemed like he already knew that my baby had rejected someone else's confession. He heard it. I took a step forward. Shaking my head, "Not really, I'm still deciding between the two." He pulled me into his arms, kissed me aggressively. Back to the hotel? Okay. As we entered, he sat me on the couch and kissed me passionately. My legs straddled over his. Edward kissed me with a mix of tenderness and passion. Choose him or me? I didn't answer. He leaned back on the couch, not letting me kiss him. Raising an eyebrow, I surprisingly saw a touch of youthful vigor in a 30-year-old man. He slowly said, choose him or me? Choose you. He swiftly maneuvered to push me down on the couch. His tone carried a hint of frustration. I just went out for a business meeting and almost got robbed coming back. I couldn't help but laugh nervously. The doorbell rang. We were both somewhat lost in emotions. Edward chuckled and scolded himself. As he walked to the door, slightly opening it, he returned with my bag in his hand. I asked in puzzlement, who is it? Edward, somewhat annoyed, kissed me. It's the delivery guy. Before I could say anything, he silenced me. His wicked side was showing. Baby, focus. He slowly started removing my clothes, kissing my forehead, lips, neck, and down. The skin at the waist was tingling. I shivered suddenly. Mist covered the window, rain trickling down outside. I guessed I loved the dampness on a summer night.